Good morning, everyone. Since it's already 11:02 and we started a minute late, so let me start with the introduction to the introduction right now. Welcome, happy Sunday. If you are in the New York area, I hope you are enjoying the deep freezing, crazy temperatures. At least my brain has been thawed for a while, and I feel like I can talk, though it's somewhat challenging. So good to see you. I see also a nice turnout. Maybe we'll have more people joining us. I always like to focus on the people who did show up and thank them for showing up and to reassure my colleagues in Israel that we have more students and they will be watching the recording because, by the way, we're running two classes, at least I think two classes right now. So good morning. Welcome to our academic administrator, Brittany, who is helping me today. Hello to all of our students. And let's cut to the chase. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today the second part of our three-part, three-session mini-series on Holocaust education in museums, challenges, methodology, and innovation that is brought to the Fish Center MA and Advanced Certificate students by the Ghetto Fighters House in Israel. The title of the session today would be Between the Archive and the Curatorship, How is a Museum Narrative Built? And it's my great pleasure to have my colleague from Israel, Oronit Lusky. Oronit, your title at the Ghetto Fighters House, you are the development director?
Director of Development and Partnerships, and yes,
Okay, I
and
was
it's a
partially
great
correct.
pleasure to be
Great
your
pleasure,
colleague.
Ronit. I'm handing it to you. You will introduce your wonderful team. You have no clue how thankful we are to you for this incredible opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. We feel the same. Good morning to you. Good evening over here. It is my pleasure to open this session as Dr. Pilnik mentioned, between the archive and curatorship. And although this is the second meeting in the course, each session, it's important for us to let you know that each session is designed to stand on its own. And so even if this is your first time joining us, you will be able to engage with today's fascinating discussion. Our speakers today are Anat Bertman Alhalel, the director of the museum's archive, and Liat Margalit, our chief curator. Since Anat has another talk to give this evening, she was recorded in advance. And we have Greta Barak, an archival researcher from the museum's archival team, with us live. And she'll be happy to respond to questions relating to Anat's presentation. So thank you all for being here today. And with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Liat.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening, my colleagues. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Liat, and I'm, as Ronit said, the chief curator of the Ghetto Fighters House Museum. Just a few words about myself. I've been working in the museum world for more than 25 years now, and especially in historic museums, which are unique and different in many ways and have challenges which are specifically for them. So again, I'm pleased to be here, and perhaps Yoni, if you may share the screen, and we'll start immediately. And I would like to start by saying what is my role as a chief curator in the museum. Are you okay with sharing the screen? Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, this is the Ghetto Fighters House Museum. And as the chief curator, my job is to navigate the museum in terms of exhibitions, which are included and planned both permanently and temporarily. And I'll explain. The Ghetto Fighters House Museum is actually a compound. It's a campus, as you can see here. It is situated in the Western Galilee, up north. I will not go into the story of its foundation since it was already told last week, but it is a fascinating story on its own. In the campus, there are two main buildings, iconic buildings, in which the museum is situated. The first you can see right here in the middle of the photo is a beautifully architected building built in the 1950s, spreading on 4 floors. And inside there are approximately 6 or 7 permanent thematic exhibitions and about 4 temporary exhibits. The other building, which is the spiral one, which you can see on the left, is what we call Yad Layeled building. And it is a museum dedicated to the story of the Holocaust through the eyes of children. Inside it, there are 2 permanent displays and 2 or 3 temporary exhibitions. My responsibility is to keep track of all the exhibition as a whole, to check that we are updated in all senses, academic, visitors' experience, museum means, etc., to make sure that the exhibits answer the needs of the museum, such as different target audience, relevant contents, new subjects, etc. And of course, and foremost, to see that the exhibitions answer our educational goals that we follow. The exhibitions in the museum are very, very different from one another in terms of both subject matters, design, and means of display. That is because we wish the visitor to have a multi-sensed experience. We want the visitor to be surprised now and then. We'll go back to that further on. And indeed, we have some exhibitions which are more technological, others are more hands-on exhibits. But all exhibitions share one common ground. They are all based on academic knowledge and on our archive or collections. This is the very basis of every exhibition that is curated in our museum. In fact, the first things that we'll do when we are thinking about a new idea to curate is to first research the updated academic research, and to go into our archive and check what it can supply us with. So in the following 40 minutes or so, I would like to talk about the very tight connection between the archive and curatorship of the different displays, and talk about the different role of artifacts in each one of them, and share with you 2 different examples of using archival material in our exhibition. But first, before going into the different examples, you have the ability, which not all visitors can do, to go into the archive and meet Anat Bertman, who is our director of archive and collection, and hear about our very, very unique archive. So please, Yoni, if you can play the movie.
What each of them brought into the archive, what Ante Zuckerman brought.
Sorry, I opening the right video this.
I'm Anat, and I'm here standing at the archive, one of our archival spaces. And I'm glad to be with you today and to introduce you with the Ghetto Fighters House archives. So let's start from the beginning. The Ghetto Fighters House archive was established in 1949 with the establishment of the kibbutz. Actually, let's say the first thing that the founders did when they came here was to establish the archive. They had only one standing building, and it was designated to be the archive. The archive, the library, and the first exhibition. The first items that were collected into the archives were the personal items that the founders brought with them when they came to Israel. Last letter they received from their parents before they were deported to the vet camps. The only photo they had of a relative or a sister or a best friend. So first they brought their personal things into the archive, and in order to encourage themselves, the member of the kibbutz, they published in the kibbutz newspaper, what each of them brought into the archive, what Antek Zuckerman brought, what Chavka Folman brought, and so on. But immediately after, they addressed the public in Israel, the Holocaust survivors, and asked them to bring anything that can testify for what happened during the Holocaust. A diary, memoir, an artifact, and a drawing that was made in the ghettos, or sometimes maybe in the camps and so on. A photograph they had, everything that can tell the story or part of the story. And on the same time, they sent people abroad, back to Europe, back to Poland, back to Germany, to the VP camps, to collect evidence, to collect testimonies, to collect artifacts, to collect footages, to collect artworks, and so on, so they can bring them here to the archive. Actually, they made it a life mission, the collecting of materials related to the Holocaust. They believed that in doing so, in funding, establishing an archive here in Israel, they are continuing doing the clandestine archival work they did in the ghettos, in the Warsaw Ghetto, in Onem Shabbos, in collecting and putting underground the archive of their movement, the Dror Freiheit movement. So for them, it was a continuation of this archival work. And as Sarah Schnell explained in her testimony you've just seen, it was very important to them to commemorate their families, their comrades, their relatives, their communities. And on the same time, it was very, very important to them to collect evidence so they can bring the persecutors to trial. And since then, until now, we are continuing doing what they did actually, keeping their legacy, of course, with the modern technology and means that we have today. Our archive, or in the archive, we received new materials every week on a regular basis. We are digitizing everything. We are uploading, not everything, it's a process, but we are uploading every day new materials into our website. You can search it. We are putting a lot of effort in digitizing the archive because, as I see it, this is one of the main purposes of the archive. Actually, there are two main purposes of the archive. First of all, we have to keep everything safe for many years, for generations to come. These artifacts has to be secure. This is why all of our spaces are designed in a way that those items will stay with us forever. This is one main purpose. The other one is to make it accessible to the wide public, to the researchers, not just historians, but they're multi-disciplined. תחתכי את זה. Not just for historians, but also for art historians, gender researchers, psychologists, and so on, that can use the materials, can conduct research in the archive using the materials of the archive, and come with new conclusions and knowledge based on the archive materials. So this is the purposes of the archive as I see it. Here in the Ghetto Fighters House, we are focusing on 3 different periods in the Jewish life. First of all, the period that came before the Nazis came to power. The Jewish communities, Jewish life, education, culture, Zionist activities, other parties which were not Zionist, and so on, Jewish life as a whole. The second period is, of course, the time that came from 1933 into the war. The Holocaust is, of course, our main period that we are focusing on. And the third one, which I found personally very, very interesting, is the days that came after the liberation. The survivors who found themselves all alone, the rehabilitation, the renewal of life in the DP camps, the immigration to Eretz Israel and to other places all around the world, the unlegal immigration, the deportation to Cyprus, detainees camps in Cyprus, British detainee camps. So this is also a period that we are focusing on. For this session, I was asked to choose an item or two to talk about. And this is always very difficult for me to choose 1 or 2 items from the archive, because we hold here millions of documents and all kinds of artifacts. So it is a difficult task for me, but I choose 2 items which are actually related to each other and belong to the same collection. And this is the Coordinatia Organization, Zionist Coordination Organization collection, Coordinatia Coordination, and this is the name of a small organization that was established after the war, after the liberation, by members of different youth movements and Jewish Zionist organizations, like Shomer HaTzair, Dror Freiheit, Vitzo, Bordonia, Akiva, and several others. And their only mission was to find the young children that during the war were rescued by Polish families or by monasteries. And they were held and kept and survived in a Polish surrounding. And for these young people that joined this small organization, some of them were Holocaust survivors themselves, and some of them were emissaries from Eretz Israel. And for them to find these children was a life mission. They couldn't bear the thoughts that those kids, those Jewish kids, will stay with these families or in Christian institutions. They decided to join forces, if I can say so, and to try to do this together because it was so important as they saw it. So together they might succeed more. And it was not an easy task at all. First of all, they had to find these kids, to locate them. Each of them, of course, no one could actually estimate how many of them were all around Poland. The parents, when they gave their children to foreign people, tried for obvious reasons to conceal their origin, their names, their parents' names, and so on. So it was very, very difficult to find these kids, who in many cases did not remember their original names. Some of them were given when they were babies, or 1 year old, or for 2 years old, and so on. The monasteries were very, very closed. I mean, you cannot enter them freely. Only in case you are a relative of a child, it was a bit easier to get in. So sometimes these people of this organization pretended to be an uncle or an aunt in order to get inside the monastery to look and find for children. In other cases, those children find a real loving home. They didn't want to live and to be separated again from what they believed were their parents. So each case was completely different. There were kids who remembered that they were Jewish, and while they were Jewish, they were persecuted. Okay? So being a Christian right now is much safer from being a Jewish, to going back to being part of the Jewish people. So each case was complicated and difficult. There were Polish parents who didn't want to give the child back. Sometimes they really loved him. Or in other cases, he was a kind of non-paid person who can take the cows out to the fields and so on. Some cases ended in court and so on. There's another issue I didn't mention yet, but it was in many cases very dangerous. Poland after the war was very anti-Semitic, and to go around the villages and all around Poland was very, very dangerous sometimes. But when they succeeded in finding a child and taking him back to what they called the Jewish people, I'm using their words as they used to call it back then, when they did succeed in doing so, they kept a card on each child and wrote down what they knew about this specific child. There is always a photo of him. And they wrote down what they knew about what this child have been going through during the war. This child, for example, was born in the Janowska camp near Lvov. He was smuggled outside the camp by a Jewish prisoner who was able to go out for work and back in the camp. And he was born, his name was Yaji Schreiber. He was born in the camp. and his parents had an agreement with a Polish lady outside the camp, a Christian Polish lady, that they will bring the baby to her and she will take care of him. And that's what happened eventually. Willy Ox, this person who was able to go out and back to the camp, took this 2 weeks baby under his coat and smuggled him to the woman who was waiting for him. His parents, Yazi's parents, perished in Janowska, but he survived. And in 1947, the Koordinacja activists took him out from this Polish lady who took care of him during the war and brought him to a Jewish orphanage. Actually, they didn't call it an orphanage because this word has a negative meaning. They call it a children home, a Jewish children home. So they brought him into this place, and later on he made Aliyah, immigrated to Israel. This is one case. During the years, some of these kids came to the Ghetto Fighters House asking for information about their pasts, who their parents were, where they were born, and so on. And in many cases, those cards help to put a piece in this picture of a child past and personal history. Another child, as you can see here, went through a lot of places. I mean, she moved from a family to another family, to a farmer that she worked. Some of the time she was all alone in a forest and so on. And she finally finds a place, a home, a kind of a home. And as you can see, she was quite grown up. I mean, she was born in 1932. So at the end of the war, she was a teenager, and she didn't want to go back to be part of the Jewish people anymore. When the Organizacja activists took her out, she used to run away at least twice back to a Polish surrounding. It was really a traumatic time for her. But in many cases, like in this one, in the children's home, the people who took care of the children tried to. There were lessons over there of Hebrew and kind of preparation for immigration to Israel. This organization was a Zionist organization, so the whole how to say it, way of life was the kind of a very Zionist one. And of course, they celebrated the Jewish holidays and so on. And in some cases, as in this case, when they sat to the Seder table and they started to sing, reading the Haggadah LePesach and singing the Pesach Jewish songs and eating the Jewish dishes, the matzot, and other traditional Jewish recipes, she finally understood where she belonged to. And this was a very crucial point in her life, and for others as well, who had these reasonable difficulties to adjust again to an environment that they didn't want to belong to anymore. To summarize, an archive has an importance of its own. But if only our team, the archival team here in Lohamei Haghetaot, will be able to explore these items and many others that we hold here, it doesn't make any sense, okay? These materials have to be accessible. Have to be accessible to the public, has to be accessible to the researchers, to the curators, and my colleague Liat Margalit, our chief curator, will elaborate about it in a few minutes. To educators, these materials has to go out, and we are doing our best to make them accessible for that important mission, as I see it. Thank you very much.
So, as you can understand, our archive is a very unique place with unique staff working in it. Not everyone can go inside and hear Anat talk. I can assure you it's an experience which is breathtaking. And as you will see in a few minutes, it is also something that we tried to convey when we curated an exhibition, which we called Past Continuous, which is dedicated to 75 years of our archive. Yes, this is it. And when we tried to think how to tell the story of our archive, as you can see, it is a unique story, both in the terms of what the archive contains, but also it's an extraordinary story in the terms of the vision of its founders and the very, very early understanding of the importance of collecting, of testimonies, etc. But when we thought about how to present the story, we decided to tell the story from a current point of view. That means that we didn't tell an historic story, but rather we wanted to say the archive is alive. The archive is something that is happening today, every day. Because today also, we and the staff of in the museum can see people bringing things to the archive. The archive continues to collect, and new artifacts are arriving to the museum. And we wanted to give the visitor a tiny bit of a feeling of how it feels to go into the archive and talk to Anat and feel the items themselves. The vision of the founders is the base for the exhibition also. And as you can see in the image in front of you, their words, their quotes, their vision surrounds the exhibition with quotes on the wall. But perhaps the most difficult part in curating an exhibition about the archive was which artifacts should we display? How can we choose from millions and millions of artifacts in our archive, which our archive includes? Should we take the first one collected, the last one collected? Should we try and give perhaps a geographical span? Or should we choose items which are most visually impressive? That is usually what we curator try to do also, since museums are at the end a visual experience. I can assure you that each and every item is fascinating, as you just heard from Anat. And each one has a unique and personal story and a connected and to an incredible human story. They are all important. So how can we decide which one to show? So for this reason, we chose, and Yoni, if you can pass one forward, we chose not to choose, but rather to turn to the main consumers of our archive of data. These are experts of Holocaust remembrance, researchers, historians, curators, educators, because at the end, they are the ones who use our archive most of the time in their research. They are in connection to the archivist, with the archivists, and they are connecting the data given to much a wider net of knowledge and putting it into context. They are the main mediators of knowledge. And we therefore asked 12 experts to choose one item, only one item, and explain why they chose what they chose. We gave them two rules. One, to begin their explanation with the words, I chose, because ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And the second, and it was a difficult one, to be short, very short, because you know that when you read the text in an exhibition, it has to be precise and short. Yoni, go one forward. I would like to show you an example of, to go to Hannah's movie for a second, please. Of one of the choices of one of the experts, Professor Hannah Yablonka, who is an historian. She's the Ghetto Fighters House historian. And with their choices, we composed our A-team of 12 artifacts, which are exhibited in the exhibition. Among them, we have photographs, documents, books, works of art, many artifacts. And here you will see an example of one professor explaining her choice. Please.
We're with Professor Hannah Yablonka in the new exhibition Past Continuous. And as you've seen, I've been asking different researchers to tell us a little bit about why they chose the specific artifact that they chose or document from the Ghetto Fighters House archives. And now it's your turn, Professor Yablonka, to tell us a little bit about what you chose.
I had a hard choice because I also have in the archive many particles that are very, very intimate from my family, including the hair, the first haircut of my small nephew, who was then 4 years old, Robika, who eventually ended his life in Auschwitz. And then I decided that I'll take a distance and I'll go into my research. And one of the most dramatic, for me, documents that I ever found in my writing the book about the trial of Adolf Eichmann was the visitor's guide or the visitor's almanac of the Ghetto Fighters Museum. As it turns out to be, they had an almanac of visitors starting in the early 1950s. Actually, from day one of the museum, they had the awareness of the need to follow up visitors and their impressions of the museum. But I went to the beginning of the 1960s, a month before the trial of Adolf Eichmann opened. And I decided to do that really as a hunch. Let me see if there was any interest in the Israeli public of the Holocaust at the beginning of the 1960s. By the way, at the beginning of the 1960s, 1 of every 4 Israelis was a survivor of the Holocaust. The population mounted to 2 million, and 1 of every 4 of them was a survivor. How much was the Israeli society involved or interested or curious about whatever happened in the Shoah and what this museum, which was that time almost the only museum, had to offer. And I found out, first of all, that thousands of Israelis came to visit the museum daily. So unlike what we used to think, there was a vast, deep interest in the Holocaust already in the beginning of the 50s, as well as more so in the 90s. While I was writing the book about the trial of Adolf Eichmann, I took the almanac of the visitors and scanned it to me, to my mind. It took some time to find it because this was a kind of an artifact that nobody ever demands. And then they found it and they brought it to me and I went day by day. And then I entered the Curatorship day. It was March of 1961, March 17, exactly a month before the opening of the trial. Gideon Hausner visited the kibbutz, like many those who were involved in preparing the trial. They came to the kibbutz to meet Antek and Sivia and to get a kind of legitimation to be the representatives of the Jewish people in the big trial that was prepared to be in the future, in the near future. And when I got to this day, March 17th, suddenly I jumped from the chair. And Gideon Hausner describes his visit to get the bon voyage from Antek and Sivia to represent the Jewish people in this case of the Shoah vis-a-vis the world. And he wrote in the Visitor's Almanac the following words. I can read them out to you as they are mentioned. I chose the Ghetto Fighters House Visitors book dated 1961. That is what I say. And Hausner was the chief prosecutor of Adolf Eichmann, said the most remembered words of the trial in what he said. Today I visited the house. I'm just looking at it. Lidin is showing you the written, and I will translate what's written here. On the eve of the opening of the Eichmann trial, the guy who, I don't know to say it, Sorer in English, the guy who was responsible, as he interpreted it, to the final solution. In the house, he called it a house or home. And I infiltrated into myself the atmosphere of this museum in order to be the shofar, the magnifier of the victims to tell their stories, and the victims of Am Israel, the Jews, and their great tragedy. Once I will be their mouth, once this man will stand a trial with the knowledge of what this man actually performed. Gideon Hausner and the date. Every Israeli, even today, knows the opening paragraph of Gideon Hausner's speech, prosecution speech at the Eichmann trial. And the most remembered words are, I shall be the mouth of the 6 million. In his book, describing the trial, Gideon Hausner describes that this sentence came to his mind on the eve, really, on the evening before the opening of the trial the next day. He felt as if the angels are above his hand and he's doing history. And when I saw this, and the first thing I read was, of course, his biography. And when I saw this sentence in the Ghetto Fighters Museum, in the house and home, as we call it, and I know it because I'm the historian of the place, for many years, when I saw this paragraph, I took such a pride and such an excitement. I didn't care that he wasn't saying exactly the things as they happened, and a very obnoxious historian came and saw something different. I really felt a huge pride in this place, which gave the inspiration of one of the most important sentences ever said in the account between the Jews and the world, which came rather late, after the biggest tragedy humankind ever knew.
Professor Jablonka, thank you very much for sharing your story.
You're very welcome.
So imagine 12 choices by different scholars, experts. I can also say that the coordination cards that Anat talked about was her personal choice, and it is also presented in the exhibition. And with this, we composed the past continuous in terms of the artifacts displayed. What was also important for us is relevancy. Of course, Hannah just explained the relevancy of each of her choice, also in terms of today, but it was fascinating to see how each and every one of the experts who chose connected it to our times, not only for historical reasons, but for humanistic purposes and relevant current events. We also displayed two things in order to convey the relevancy of the archive today. A poster that the founders published during the 50s. You can see it just behind the visitor that you see in the image, yeah. And it's a poster calling people to donate items, anything they have at home, which can be the base for the archive. We are collecting photographs, letters, everything that you can. Please help us. And it's a very early understanding of the need to collect. And in order to explain the fact that we are still working on it, 75 years later, we created this on the screen, quite similar poster, but in present means, saying today, just like 75 years ago, we are still collecting, calling people to continue and send and donate things to our archive. Please go one forward. We also, I just remembered, we also talked about the importance of the ability to access data from far away. And for this reason, we created a digital platform to which people can go in, visitors inside the exhibition, but later they can take it home with their own mobile and research each and every of the items with the explanation of the expert themselves. So the items are the stars of the exhibition, but it was also important for us to tribute those who do the work behind the scenes. And now, Yoni, you can go one forward. We created a modern portrait of the 16 very, very dedicated people that work in our archive. Most visitors don't see them and don't know the daily Sisyphic work that goes behind the scenes. And we felt that it is very important both to give them a stage, but also to make people understand that behind this work is an active decision to remember. And it's an active role that we also invite people to participate in and to understand the need of doing so. And I will finish this part of this exhibition. You can go one more forward, Yoni, please. We also use the tools of the archivist in order to understand the fact that, again, it's an active work, daily, specific, with the question, how should we remember? Again, to explain and present the fact that remembering is an active choice. And I would like to end this part by mentioning two dilemmas that we had, curatorial dilemmas. One is connected to the fact, Anat mentioned the importance of the artifacts themselves and the fact that they need very specific and stiff conditions. This is, of course, our first care. But again, there is a tension between the need to display, and we wanted to display the original artifacts, and between the concern to the well-being of the artifacts themselves. And I can tell you that after a while of presenting it, we felt that it will be more secure to replace some of them with replicas. At the end of every day, the archivists go and put covers on some of the items themselves. And it is a tension that we have in each and every exhibition between the need to preserve and to give the artifacts the best conditions and the need to display them. And I will also mention, I will not show it to you, but I will also mention one of the choices that one made by one professor. She chose two images of a Jewish doctor in Warsaw, one from 39 and the other from 42. And in the later image, the doctor was examining a child, a very ill, starved child, in which the first thing when you gaze at the image you see is the swallowed stomach. And this rose an ethical dilemma. Should we display such an image? Is it right to do so in terms of the victims? We also have young visitors that visit the museum. So these are the sort of dilemmas that we deal with in terms of artifacts such as this. Do I have time to go to the second exhibition, or are we?
Yes, please.
Yes.
No.
All right.
We would like to finish the call and to allow some time for Q&A by 12:10, 12:15.
All right, so I'll do it quickly because this is an example of a completely different exhibition and a completely different connection between us and the archive. What you are looking at is an exhibition that we call Between the Trees, an exhibition about the Holocaust in the former Soviet Union. It is a huge subject, and we had first and foremost to clear definition and define limits. When does the story begin? Where does it take place? And we decided to display it within three different stages: before, during, and after the Holocaust. And what you are looking at now in the image is the introduction part. It's before the war, 22 of June 1941, just before of the Nazi invasion into the former Soviet Union territories. And we decided to try in this section to say something. First to define the time zone on which we are talking about. We did it through this poster on the right. There is also a huge map, which you cannot see, which defines the geographical limits on which we're talking about. But, Yoni, if you go one forward, we also chose approximately 6 or 7 artifacts which I have to say, most of them are not from our archive because we looked into our archive and then we decided that we need more specific ones. Each one of them is a symbolic item for a dilemma or a complex definition of what it was being a Jew in the former Soviet Union. One of the artifacts deals with the connection with the communist regime. One of the artifacts deals with or resembles the complex relation with tradition. One of the artifacts with the Zionism, etc., etc. But this part, which I will not go into right now, was formerly easy. Our real challenge in terms of this exhibition was due to the fact that the essence of the story of the Shoah in the former Soviet Union territories is a story of killing, of mass killing of communities. Jews were collected in villages, in the forest, in different areas, and were killed by the Einsatzgruppen through bullets. How do we show it? How can we present such a difficult subject in terms of visualization? We do have a few images in our archive, but do we want to display them? Is it right to do in terms of, again, the dignity of the victims, of our visitors? These are thoughts that we had to deal with in order to present the cruel and mutual fate Jews in the former Soviet Union had. And I want to share with you our solution. Please, Yoni, if you can go one more forward. We decided that this exhibition or this part of the exhibition will not convey artifacts at all. But this exhibition or this hall will be designed as if it is a forest. Visitors go in. It is quite surprising. It is not something that you expect to see when you go into a museum hall. They are, at the first moments, a bit uncomfortable. They don't know exactly where to stand, but it takes a few minutes. And they kind of stand between the trees. And then they can look at a very large 6-meter installation, media installation, that conveys the story of the 4 years of the Holocaust through the eyes of the Jews that were in the forest. Why forest? Because forest resembles running into the forest, the mass murder, the hiding, partisans, difficulties of needing to live in an familiar area, etc. And what we did was go into our archives. Please, Yoni, if you can go one more forward. And we went into testimonies of the founders of our kibbutz and our museum, but those whose biography was from these territories, the former Soviet Union territories. And we took sentences from their testimonies, only words and voices, and we kind of intertwined them into one coherent story, like a matrix that is displayed in an installation. The visitors see very little. It is mostly imagined. They see only the trees. They see the changing seasons. They can hear the voices of, well, these are actually actors reading the sentences from the testimonies. But in a whole, they experience a story with different themes inside the forests. If you can go one more forward, Yoni, and you can see, I will go back to curatorial dilemmas after they see the movie. So go one more, one forward. It is very hard to see it from far away, but try to imagine.
Summertime. We'd take our wagon to the forest. We'd stretch out on hammocks. Enjoy the fresh air.
The whole school went out to the forest. Archery, a picnic, a field day in nature.
So imagine 11 minutes of hearing the different voices of the founders telling the story and just experiencing the different seasons and the way that the trees resemble and represent the horrific things that went there. You don't need to see anything. You just by listening to the voices and the music that was especially written for this installation, I think people can understand the entire story. And I do want to share with you a few dilemmas which we had. Again, our main audience, target audience, are young people. We have traumatic audience, not once. Families, especially today, of course, I should say that this was planned before October 7. We could not imagine the similarity or what people today experience when they go in there. They almost all talk about the Nova Forest or what happened in the South, but we couldn't imagine that what would happen. And one of our dilemmas, for example, was the shooting. Should we include a sound of shooting? This is the main story. How should we represent it? Is there anything that we have to see? Or should we just create a few shooting? It's not only one. Should we just put one as a symbol of what happened? These are the sort of dilemmas, and there are many, many more. These are the sort of dilemmas which we had to cope with in this very, very, very sensitive installation. I think from the reactions of what we see from visitors, we did okay. Again, it is sensitive, but it is powerful. I can say that the youth that goes in it, and I think Mali can perhaps tell you more about it, which are very distracted and usually have their phone in their hands, and they go in big groups and they have each other. Something in this installation and the powerful music and sound is very um, how do you say, like kind of collecting them together, and they react very strongly to it. In fact, we can say that we received a song of a visitor, 18-year boy visitor who was there and was impressed by it, and he kind of reflected after visiting and wrote a song as an inspiration. So I hope it says something. And at the end, I would like to say a word about the last hall, which is the hall that deals with the aftermath of the story. Here we talk about the both the numbers, and we give the numbers of what happened in the Holocaust and afterwards. And we enable visitors who just came out of the forest and heard the voices but didn't see the people that are telling the story to know more about behind the scenes, about the people who they really were. And we did it by talking to their children or grandchildren, because we wanted the young generation to be more involved and to mediate the stories to our young visitors. And we made short interviews with them. Each one of them tells in a few minutes in a video about his or her mother or grandmother, the one we just heard inside the installation. And through this, we also connect the younger generation, and we also enable narratives such as our story is not heard enough, which is something that we heard again and again and again from young people who came to Israel from the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and they feel that their narrative is not yet part of the Holocaust remembrance story. So this is also something that we can deal with in this last hall, which enables a dialogue. And I think that is it. So this is a completely different
Thank you,
way
Liat.